If we take the road south from University Point, eventually we see a ruined military APC off in the distance beneath a crumbling overpass. We recognize this location. We are close to where we found the refrigerator, within which we found the boy ghoul Billy. He's right over there. You can watch that video by clicking here. After we complete the game's primary story, this turns into a military checkpoint, where we'll often find a battle. But before we complete the story, we can still come here to loot it of its treasures, though in this instance we don't find a lot. However, if we move to the puddle beneath the overpass where we find one APC partially submerged, we do find a power armor frame with randomly generated pieces of armor. These, I believe, are level dependent. When I arrived, T-51 spawned, but if you arrive later in the game with a much more powerful character, this has the ability to spawn XO1 pieces. Sadly, there's nothing inside this sunken APC. Heading out and continuing south down the road, we see one of those pre-war Red Rocket coolant refilling stations. These have always intrigued me. I'd love to see one functional, just to see how it moved. Across the road from this is a ruined trailer. As we get close, we see the exterior covered with barnacles. That's a sign that inside we may find a giant barnacle, and sure enough, there's one right next to a ruined desk. So we'll pop a rad axe to protect ourselves since we can't kill that sucker. Stepping inside... Oh! Radioactive barnacle mucus. We got some rads, but it's far less than it could have been. Inside we don't find much, no containers, no caps in the desk, though on top of the desk we find a note. Park sign-in. Neponset Park visitor log. Recent visitors, C. Dieter. And the rest are all blank, so looks like C. Dieter was here at the park by himself. Well, that must have been nice. An entire park all to yourself. But we don't find evidence that he ever checked out. Could he still be there? Nearby we see two cabins. If we're gonna find C. Dieter, he's likely to be in one of those. But where there are barnacles, there is water, and where there is water, there are Mirelurks. So creeping forward ever so slowly, we discover Neponset Park, and we see steps leading up to the northernmost shack. But off in the distance in the middle of the water, we see a Mirelurk king. Just before we're about to tag him, he walks off, waiting until he stops.
Don't mean to make you nervous, but I don't think we're alone.
Oh great, and he was legendary. Switching to the knife and running behind the cabin, we can use VATS to discover that there's a buried Mirelurk nearby. We'll have to come back for him later. But hiding does the trick, and the Mirelurk Razor Claw eventually loses the scent. Peering around the cabin again, we see that he had brought with him two Mirelurks, but he's running off to the south. Maybe we can get him alone. Walking to the other side of the cabin, sure enough, we find him alone.
Don't look, but I think we're being watched.
Got him. But this alerted the other two Mirelurks. They race our way. This is my squishy paper assassin, so I'm gonna hide behind this cabin until they lose my scent. At length, they return to the lake. And here I thought I'd take a chance. Pulling out our anti-material rifle, we can try to get a sneak critical on one of the Mirelurk's faces.
I heard something.
Well, got the sneak critical, but it wasn't enough to one-shot them. We can take some shots at the Mirelurks while they charge us, and when they get close enough, switch to the blade. But all the commotion seems to have attracted a Mirelurk hunter. With that, we almost clear the place. There was that one buried Mirelurk that the wonders of Robco technology told us about at the beginning of the battle. Since we know where he is, we can sneak on by and get a sneak critical. With with that, we clear the park. Now it's time to explore it for any sign of sea deer. This pond has a short river leading to a tube going beneath the road. Nearby we see that a tree's roots had grown over a small boat. Heading down the river to the pipe, we see that it's blocked in with garbage and dirt. Nothing of interest there. Heading back to the water before we enter the shack, we can explore this dock that we see. We find a fishing pole, some empty beer bottles, and a cooler filled with Nuka-Cola cherry and some meat. Hopping into the dinghy.
If we got rid of the Mirelurks, Neponset Park would be a pretty nice place.
Maybe before the war, Deacon, but looks a little gloomy to me now. Inside, we find an ammo box, and just then, the Brotherhood decided to show up. Looks like something nearby attracted their attention. A pre-war barge, still guarded by Mr. Gutsy. But that's none of our business. We'll let the Brotherhood do their thing. Before heading to the shack, we can loot some Mirelurk eggs in a mound. I see a couple wriggling there. Two vertibirds now. Looks like they're also attacking Quincy. Well, good luck, Brotherhood. Heading back to the shack, we can head up the steps to find the front door locked with an advanced lock. Peering in the window, we see an end-of-dungeon steamer trunk and a terminal. Now, I could pick this lock, but I want to see if I can find a key. No! Oh! Looks like the Brotherhood didn't fare too well. The wreckage even scattered all the way over here. Thought I heard a soldier talking, hope no one got killed. Well, to see if we can find a key, we can head on over to this other green shack. We see a cooking station nearby, and what was once a beautiful cherry red 4-door Corvega. Sadly, this one is trashed by time. Before heading in, we can loot the corpse of that legendary Mirelurk king, where we find a powered operator's belted chest piece. Okay, might come in handy. Nearby, we find, oh no, a corpse of a Brotherhood Lancer captain. Well, no sense letting her go to waste. We can loot some fusion cells and a laser rifle. Heading towards the shack, we see more barnacles on the outside of the door. So popping another rat axe, we can head up the stairs. But oddly enough, this time it didn't spit anything at me. Oh, hatchlings. Yep, and the barnacles still can't be killed. Guess that was a waste of a rat axe. Heading inside the shack. Oh! What's he connected to, though? Is he connected to the barnacles? Nope. Oh well. I never liked these cymbal-clacking monkeys. The entire back of this cabin is torn off. We can loot some Mirelurk eggs and clothing from a dresser, but that's about it. Outside, we find the remains of a playground. There's a barbecue right by the water and a huge stack of dead fish. Someone put this here, but no corpse, no body, no key. Well, looks like we'll just have to pick the lock. Heading back to shack number 1, we can head up the stairs and pick the door's advanced lock.
That is some precision picking there.
Inside, we find the hallmarks of someone having been here. A coffee pot, 2 ceramic cups, candles, and a lantern. In the southwestern corner, we find a desk. Here we find some cigarettes left unsmoked. Whomever lived here left before finishing them, though it looks like they would have lasted him quite a while. We see some empty booze bottles, and on top of the desk is a personal terminal. From the desk of Charles Dieter Jr. Here we find 2 entries. Inside the first journal entries, we find 4 journal entries. Starting on October 19th, 2077. My argument with Carol delayed my arrival, but I got a pretty good view of the sunset from the road. Getting the generator and lamps going in the dark was a real pain. I guess city life has made me soft. Ha! Don't remember my old man ever having to set up in pitch black, but then again, I can't recall Mom ever delaying the trip ever. But what are you gonna do, huh? First year in the old cabin alone. The silence is just what I need. This kind of solitude should leave me free to work on the novel that's been kicking around in my head all these years. Gonna grab some shut-eye and then I'll get started in the morning. The next one is penned the very next day, October 20th. Rose earlier than expected to the sounds of construction work. It seems they've begun work on a rock quarry up the road since coming here last year. no matter. Just a bump on the road. I can work through it. I'm sure Steinbeck and Hemingway didn't work in total silence. Surely I can work this into the narrative somehow, give the main character an edge. Yeah, that's the ticket. Poor guy left home to find some peace and quiet, only for some construction workers to start working at a nearby quarry. Well, let's see if he got any progress done. And the next one, the very next day on the 21st. Doggone it! What kind of sweatshop are they running over there? They work into the late hours of the night. I can't escape this constant hammering and digging. When I get back to the city, I'm gonna lodge a formal complaint. There's no way those are union hours. I can hear it now. Maybe if you were a better writer, you could just work through it. Well, Carol, this is nothing compared to your banshee wails. If I can ignore your constant nagging, I can work through this. Back to the book. I'll deal with the quarry morons later. Ooh, okay, Charles, looks like there's trouble at home. I think we can better understand why he left for the cabin. And in the final one, on October 22nd, the day before the bombs dropped, Ralph Somethingski, that was the foreman's name. I'm writing it here for my formal complaint. Something Polish. Idiot yelled right in my face and told me to get out of his. I hope the jerk falls into the quarry. I hope all of them do. Then maybe I can get some peace and quiet around here. Can't get it at home, that's for sure. Spent the time shooting cans off the picnic tables, then started taking out some of the crabs scurrying around the river. If I'd had a son, I could teach him how to shoot just like Dad taught me. Instead, I only got daughters. Not good for anything, are you, Carol? Dear God, they're at it again. Jehoshaphat, I can't stand this racket! What a jerk! As the father of a daughter, that last line there really made me angry. Starting to get the impression this guy just can't appreciate what he has. Backing out of his journal entries, look at this, we can read his book, titled The Silence Before the Storm. Oh, wow. Well, that was rather clairvoyant of him. He inadvertently predicted his immediate future. Inside, we've got an acknowledgement, and we can read 3 chapters. All right. See what kind of fictional author this guy was. First, the acknowledgement. To my wife, Carol, and my darling daughters, you are the source of my inspiration. Oh, that's brilliant. I think that tells us that if they were the source of his inspiration, his book is going to be really cynical. I can't wait to dive into it. Backing out, Chapter 1, Dead of Night. As the captain steered the ship, Oh no, he only got half a sentence. There's nothing else. The cursor stops here. The noise from the quarry wouldn't let him continue his novel. Looking at Chapter 2, it's completely blank. Backing out and looking at Chapter 3, also blank. Aw, I'm disappointed. I wanted to read his book. Oh well, it is what it is. Turning around, we can loot an end-of-dungeon steamer trunk where we find a whole bunch of goodies, but what we don't find is his body. If he was here, at least the day before the bombs dropped, surely we should find his remains, but no, there's nothing here. And the door was locked, but we don't find a key. Maybe he's somewhere nearby. Maybe he took the key with him. Well, where should we start looking for him? In his terminal, he mentioned a nearby quarry. I wonder if we can see it from here. Sure enough, if we look south, we see big blocks stacked on top of each other. Well, that must be the quarry. We'll head that way. Before we do, we find the corpse of another Brotherhood Knight Sergeant. Man, the Brotherhood did not fare well. Passing by their flaming vertebrate wreckages, we can make our way towards those big blocks. We again pass beneath the crumbling overpass. We approach the blocks from the quarry. We see that they're on the back of some sort of train car. Oh, and what's this? We find a skeleton face down in the mud, and nearby we find the Neponset cabin key. This must be the body of Charles Dieter Jr. Beneath the key is a note. Last entry, October 23rd, 2077. Might as well finish the journal, huh? Certainly couldn't finish the book, not with all this doggone racket. Hammering all day and night. Let's see how well you hammer with bullets in your head, huh? Rotten hell, you bastards. And you can join them, Carol. Holy cow, so Charles Dieter left his cabin on the day of the apocalypse with a hardened sniper rifle to kill the workers at the quarry. But it looks like either before he started or during his murderous rampage, the bombs dropped, incinerating him. All that remains is his bleached skeleton and a trilby hat. Here, we'll just put that back. Yeah, looking good, Charles. Peering off towards the quarry, what's that? Raiders. Looks like we might as well finish what Charles started. The quarry is no longer occupied by Polish construction workers, but now 200 years after the bombs, it is inhabited by raiders. This quarry is called Quincy Quarry, and it's named after a real-life Quincy Quarry. Quincy Quarry was built in 1825. At that time, the government was looking for a source of stone to construct the Bunker Hill Monument. So, the stone that made Bunker Hill came from this quarry. In order to get the stone to Bunker Hill, they had to build railway tracks that went from Quincy Quarry to Bunker Hill. Since Quincy Quarry was the source of the beautiful white granite that built Bunker Hill, the railway became known as the Granite Railway. After the construction of Bunker Hill, Quincy Quarry continued to produce some of the best stone in all of America. But eventually the quarry was closed in 1963. And it's here where the real-world history of Quincy Quarries becomes a bit darker. After it was abandoned, there was no one here to pump rainwater out of the quarry, and so over the years it was filled with water. This attracted daredevil cliff divers who thought it would be fun to tempt fate, who would leap from the sides of the quarry to splash down in the waters below. But the problem is that the floor of the quarry was uneven, and it was impossible for the cliff divers to see whether they were leaping into a deep bit or a shallow bit. Therefore, many people were injured, and some even died. The city of Quincy put up signs, but cliff jumpers ignored them. The city didn't know how to deal with this problem, and so the problem persisted until the 1980s. At that time, the city decided, well, if we put a bunch of telephone poles and trees at the bottom, cliff jumpers will see the poles and decide not to jump. So they threw a bunch of poles into the water, hoping they would float, discouraging cliff jumping. But the logs became waterlogged and sank just under the surface of the water. They never sank to the very bottom. They just sort of floated about 2 feet beneath the surface, making the logs invisible so the cliff jumpers wouldn't see them, and simultaneously making the quarry even more dangerous. Jumpers would hit solid wood, only 2 feet beneath the surface. Due to this, the injury and fatality rate at Quincy Quarry skyrocketed. According to the New York Times, many divers sent to the quarries to look for missing cliff jumpers would find other bodies that they weren't even sent there to retrieve. It wasn't until 1985 that a solution to this problem was found. In that year, the Metropolitan District Commission of Boston purchased Quincy Quarries and turned it into the Quincy Quarries Reservation. Then, when Boston began their Big Dig Highway project, which I talked about in my video on the Mass Pike tunnels, east and west, you can watch that video here, they dumped all the dirt they dug to create the highway tunnels in the Quincy Quarries. Today, Quincy Quarries is used as a public park. It's popular with rock climbers, and people come here for a wonderful view of the Boston skyline. But in the Fallout universe, we find that Quincy Quarries has a much different history. After killing all of the raiders here at Quincy Quarries, including the raider boss Slow, we can retrace our steps all the way back to the body of Charles Dieter to create a point of reference from which we can explore the quarries. Heading down the hill from his skeleton, the first thing we see is a big truck trailer dumping irradiated barrels filled with nuclear toxic waste into the quarries. So instead of filling the quarries with dirt from the Big Dig, the pre-war government used it as a toxic waste disposal site. This was the noise that Charles Dieter Jr. heard from his cabin at Neponset Park. They were tossing these barrels into the rocks below, each one making a horrendous clank as it fell to the quarry's depths. To the south, we see a gate. Heading through the gate to explore, we climb a hill where we find huge blocks of granite ready for shipping and a trailer. The door is wide open. Stepping inside, we find a novice-locked toolbox, and on the opposite side of the trailer, we find a Vault-Tec lunchbox belonging to Donna. Sadly, I just got a big bowl of noodles. Heading out of the trailer and up the hill, we see a Red Rocket truck stop at the top, and near to this is the quarry's entrance sign, Quincy Quarries. The raiders have since defiled it, putting a corpse at the tip of the sign, and the blocks ready for transport tell us that this was still a functional working quarry at the time of the nuclear apocalypse. This, I think, can give us another interpretation for the nuclear barrels we see there. Note that the freeway overpass going over the quarry crumbles right above the quarry. The toxic barrels we find in the quarry are falling out of the back of a transport truck. It could be that the US government was simply transporting these toxic barrels to another destination, but when the bombs dropped, this truck fell from the freeway overpass, and when it hit the ground, the door to the truck shattered, dumping the toxic barrels into the quarry. If that's the case, then it wasn't barrels being thrown into the quarry that Charles Dieter heard, but it was the workers cutting these giant blocks. So 2 possible interpretations of the evidence we find. Let me know in the comments which one you think is accurate. Back on the other side of that gate, we find the first of a couple of shacks. Inside the shack, we find a cooler with food inside, and peering out the window, we see that the raiders had set up target practice on the other side of the pool of water at the bottom of the quarry. And here we find settler corpses. They were either using corpses or live settlers for target practice. On the other side of this shack, we find another cooler by a refrigerator, and then a ramp on the northern end. Here we can loot another corpse and take the ramp all the way down to the water. Looks like the Brotherhood are still fighting off in the distance. Here we can swim in the water, but I'm gonna pop some Radix and Radaway just to be safe. I don't have any good radiation armor on this character. Swimming across the way, sure enough, these are the corpses of settlers. We do find one raider here, but I think this is a guy that I killed. On the platform, we also find a trader. The raiders were using bottles for target practice. We find some wine and a Nuka-Cola. I read online that we find a Nuka-Cola Quantum here, but I think that might be a random chance. In my game, I just found a standard Nuka-Cola. Instead of exploring the rest of the perimeter of this water, we can go back to that first shack and climb up the stairs. We'll get to the rest of it in a minute. Here we can loot another corpse just outside, where we find a table upon which is a pipe weapon and 2 cartons of 38 caliber rounds. Peering over the ledge, look at that. We find some tar berries growing in this water. Not sure if I want to eat irradiated tar berries. But back up top, we see that a path continues on the water level to the west, but instead we'll head up some stairs to the south. On this platform, we see a staircase leading up to a trailer. After looting a raider outside the trailer, we have to unlock an expert-locked sliding door to explore the insides. Inside, we find some containers, and on the far end, 2 ammo canisters and a tool case. On the other side of this trailer, we can loot the remains of that machine gun turret we destroyed. And that's it for up here. So turning around and going back down the stairs, we can follow a cut pathway to the west. This leads to shack number 2. Inside shack number 2, we find a chem box with Psycho inside. On the other side of this wall, we find a cap stash. And this shack leads to a path that hugs the quarry wall off to the west. Peering at the water, we see spouts of green radioactive water. I wonder how deadly those are. We'll explore them in a minute. At the end of this pathway, we see that it turns south, and peering below us, oh no, it's a butcher shop. My guess is those are the corpses of traders and scavengers. We'll have to head down there to find out. At the other side of this catwalk, we see a platform and then a path off to the east. Let's explore this platform first. The raiders had set up more tin cans and bottles, presumably for target practice. And to the south, we find another resource station, 2 ammo canisters, 1 toolbox, and an advanced lock floor safe with a whole bunch of goodies inside. We can go up or east. Let's start by following the lights down the path to the east. We see that this opens up to a staircase to the south. We'll go there in a minute. And continuing east leads us to the other side of that shack. All right, so we've done a big loop. Heading back, we can go up a big wooden ramp. This brings us to yet another platform. Here we find a chair overlooking the water, and lying in the chair is another ammo canister. From here, we can take another wooden ramp up to a third shack, and it's beginning to get dark. Let me turn on my light. This was their kitchen. We find meat in a filing cabinet, meat lying out on a table, a cooler with Psycho, and more meat in their refrigerator. free experience from a cooking station. After looting some whiskey and dirty water on a table, we can loot a tool case and a chem box on a nearby shelf, and at the end of the shack we find a bunch of beds. The shack opens up through a pathway to the south. This brings us down to a third trailer, where we killed those 2 raiders earlier. Inside we find 2 ammo boxes next to a novice-locked red toolbox, some jet on a desk, a stim pack on a filing cabinet, and we can loot their corpses. Heading out of here, we can take a staircase down to an empty platform. This goes behind the quarry if we wanted to leave. But to continue exploring, we can head east down another staircase, which brings us all the way back down to water level. Here we find a red door leading inside the rock. There's a cooler next to a refrigerator, and to the right, we find the entrance to Vault 88. We only find this if we have the Vault-Tec Workshop DLC installed. I covered the story of Vault 88 in a different video that you can watch here, so we'll bypass this for now. Continuing east, we can loot the corpses of the raiders that we killed. Inside the bedroom where we killed that 1 raider, we find 3 beds and a novice-locked wooden crate. After looting some ammo and chems,
Now I'm feeling all sorts of uncomfortable about my locker back at HQ.
don't worry, Deacon, I'll never steal your stuff. We find a staircase against the eastern wall that brings us back out to that light-lined pathway we found topside. This leaves only one thing left to explore. Heading back northwest, instead of going in the shack like we did earlier, we can take a staircase down to the water level. Here we find more irradiated barrels, and going all the way down, we see a path that leads back to the first shack to the east, or we can follow this ledge to the north. We find a bit of a land and junk bridge out into the very middle of this irradiated water. Here they have some corpses hanging from a crane. And heading west, we find their slaughterhouse. Heads on pikes and cinder blocks, bodies hanging from hooks, and piled in one corner, the bodies of settlers and traders. This is where they process their prey, stripping the corpses of anything valuable, putting them in a trunk, and then using the bodies for target practice. After looting the corpses, we can loot a yellow wooden crate with a whole lot of stuff, more than we usually find in these yellow crates. And then another end-of-dungeon steamer trunk, but this one only has 16 bottle caps and a chest piece inside. We can then explore the water, but we don't find much. We can't get inside the red crane or climb on top of it, though if we stand right on top of those spouts of green irradiated water, we get way more rads than we do while standing in the rest of the water. This tells us that the toxic waste has eaten away at the quarry floor, seeped down deep into the earth, and has had some sort of reaction, causing geysers at the bottom of the quarry. And with that, we explore Neponset Park, learn the fate of Charles Dieter Jr., and rid the world of ghoul raiders from Quincy Quarries. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I publish new Fallout videos each and every week here on my channel, so if you don't want to miss my next episode, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I have a brand new shirt in the shop. The Burned Man Walks. That's right, it's everyone's blue-eyed, burned, and bandaged, pistol-whipping ex-Legion Mormon. You can find this design on shirts in a variety of men's, women's, and children's sizes, and in a wide array of colors. This design also comes on a bunch of other products as well, like smartphone cases, including iPhone and Samsung cases, mugs, pillows, posters, prints, etc. So if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon or a member here on YouTube. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week with more brand new videos.
Nice.